right, we have the one and only Michael Herklots in the building from Ferio Tego. How are you, sir?
What's up, man?
It's good to see you, man. I'm very excited about this podcast.
I am too. I'm excited about the day. We've got the whole day together.
Yeah, it should be entertaining. But the reason why I really am kind of excited about this one is, even though you're 10 years my senior in this industry, our stories are similar in a lot of ways. You started off in retail, just to really kind of briefly surmise. You started off in retail and eventually you gravitated into having your own brand. Now, kind of for starters, when you started, you don't really talk about the kiosk at the humidor, and then and I'm going to bash this name, however you say it. What was the cigar store? It starts with a G.
Gloucester Street.
Yeah, that's not how it's spelt at all.
Massachusetts is weird like that. Gloucester, Worcester, but it looks like Gloucester.
Yeah. So when I started doing my research on it, I was like, I think this is it.
Gloucester.
Yeah. So you were there for about 2 years and 2 years, right?
Something like that.
Okay. So, like, did you find yourself around anybody in that particular point where you might have had like a mentor or somebody that really kind of carried you along into the cigar industry? Because that's really when you're in your infancy, right?
Yeah, but it was such a wild moment in time because I loved working retail, but at that point I was still so passionately focused on becoming a musician that as much as I took my job seriously and I loved doing the work, my long-term vision was moving to New York and continuing to perform and do all that. But there were, I was very lucky. I've always been around older people. My social circle was always just older. And so when I got into the industry, a little bit at the kiosk, definitely when I got to Gloucester Street, the customer base, my coworkers, just everyone treated me like an adult. And it was a pretty important shop. And so a lot of reps would come in and they would treat me like an adult and be willing to teach. And you got to think time and place, too. That was 98, 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's right at the tail end of the cigar boom. And there really was no resource for information. So it was very old school in that way. Like you learned from people who were generous enough with their time to share. And so that era of sales reps was a really important era, I think, back. I mean, they were legendary reps. And then listen, I met Rocky Patel in 1999, maybe 2000, when he was selling Indian tobacco. I met Lito around that time. I met Jonathan. All these guys were just starting out kind of when I was starting out. And so it was looking back on it, these are people who have continued to play a very meaningful role in my life over all those years. Just wild when you think of where it all started. But I will say, it's a long way to answer your question. The original manager at the Gloucester Street store, when I was working in the cart, he really, he saw that I was very passionate and very serious. And at the time, there were free Wednesday night tastings. And so I had no money. So I would go to these free Wednesday night tastings, and he could see quickly that I was really passionate about it. And so he would always spend a little extra time with me and teach me a little more. And then ultimately, when I went to Gloucester Street, he had left to become the GM at Davidoff and Madison Avenue. And then I was going to New York quite often, and so I would stop by the Davidoff shop and see him. But even that was crazy. I was 20, 21, and they would bring me upstairs to the VIP lounge and pour me a coffee. Who the fuck is this kid?
Right.
But then fast forward, he was like, look, if you're going to move to New York as a musician, if you need a day job, you got one here. And so then when I moved to New York, I started working at Davidoff, and then certainly that's where I think he really became one of those key mentor-like figures. But I guess it did start in the era that you're talking about.
So who's the guy?
David Kitchens.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
You still talk to him?
Yeah, a bit. He left the industry maybe 10 years ago now, but he was with Davidoff till 2008. Then he left to run Holtz in Philadelphia for a year or two.
Oh, no kidding.
And then he had a place in Providence, so he worked on a store there for a little while, and then he left the industry and he's back to like building spaceships or something.
So he saw the potential in you, obviously.
Yeah, and then when you really like, it's funny. I still see people I knew from Boston, and they always say like, you always spoke about cigars differently. And that was even like my first year or two in. Like, I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. Right. But it also didn't matter because at least what I was conveying was what I experienced, which was not wrapper, binder, filler, country of origin. It was just like, this one tastes like this one reminds me of this. I know what you like, you should try this. And so even like over the years now, I see people I haven't seen in 20 years, and they're like, dude, I remember you. I used to come into Gloucester Street. You always had this recommendation and this, that, whatever. But definitely when I got to New York, Davidoff flagship store on Madison Avenue was a serious place. The customers were wild. It was probably one of the most important stores in the country at that time. So it gave me a lot of exposure to serious cats, right. Every manufacturer that was anyone wanted to be in that shop.
Of course.
And they came in. Every celebrity, every banker, anyone who was anyone, like that was the place. And I got there when I was 22. So I had to quickly kind of like figure out my character and figure out what worked and what didn't, and how could I still be authentically me, but also like polish myself up for Madison. But then David really, really took me under his wing there, gave me a lot of opportunities. A guy named George Brightman, you'll always hear his name pop up with guys from my generation, because he just was a very generous guy. He worked for Cigar Aficionado for a long time. And
yeah, I don't think he likes us too much.
That's all right. He helped out. You know what? That he doesn't know you. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But he helped out Pete Johnson a lot in the beginning. Everyone has a George Brightman story if you were active or growing in that late 90s, early 2000s period.
Well, he's kind of popped up again, and he's been on a lot of the podcasts and stuff with Bear and with Coop and all these other things.
Yeah, he has me blocked.
He blocked Palmer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, these things happen.
Yeah, it happens. It's no big deal.
He seems like a good guy. Honestly, he does. I just want to get him like a good camera, something decent, maybe like a reasonable chair, so that
Yeah, but that's what, man. Like, that's generational, bro. I mean, it's like FaceTiming with your parents. Like, there's no, like, just hold it up. Just hold it up. Everything is done here. It's
I'm
just
looking at your ear, Mom.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's too funny. All right, so I feel like, so you did Berkeley College for 4 years, right? And obviously your dream was jazz, music, so on and so forth. And then as you're kind of developing, I feel like you had the need for the job. But not only that, I think that you saw opportunity with those jobs to kind of parlay, like, hey, we can get the band in here. We can do these specific things. Is that something that was that your focal point when you kind of got into the cigar industry on the retail level?
My focal point when I got into the industry in a retail level was making sure I could get a discount because I couldn't afford the hobby.
That's fair.
But as an artist, man, you get cuckoo about stuff. You find something you love, and that passion button gets engaged, and it's like, oh man, you just go down the rabbit hole of it all. And you want to be. Every artist I know wanted to be an artist because it was their favorite thing to do, and they didn't want to do anything else other than their favorite thing to do. And so they try and figure out a way to make a living. But then often they have to find a day job that they dislike in order to pursue the thing that they love. But I got lucky because I got a day job doing something I also really loved and I loved learning about. And especially when I got to New York, I remember we were having a lot of success with our band and some of the other projects I was doing. And so I would take time off from the cigar shop to go on tour or to go play, and I really missed it, I would bring my laptop and I'd like email customers and see what they need and call in orders. So I can also remember very early on thinking, like, I can't imagine not being involved in this. Like, it's just something so special, especially then when you started meeting, like, I met the Quesada family, like 2003. I met Christian Aroa and went to Honduras in 2003.
Did he teach you how to retrohale?
Did who?
Christian.
It certainly came up in conversation.
That's his thing.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Even then, I didn't participate, but he did. But it's all just so circumstantial, and all these things just aligned. And I remember thinking, 2004. Actually, interesting. We were talking about George Brightman. He was working for Zeno Platinum, and he had to take some time away for some health stuff. And I was working at the time Wednesday through Sunday at Davidoff. And George was doing all these events all over the country, and he couldn't do them anymore. So I said, look, if we can reconfigure these events and do them on Monday nights, then I'll work. And then Sunday after we close the shop, or Monday morning, I'll fly to wherever this event is, and I'll do the event, and then I'll fly home Tuesday, and that way I can be at work Wednesday. And they were like, we can't pay you for 7 days. Like, that's outrageous. I'm like, no. I don't even want that. But I'll cover it. Just pay for my flight, pay for my meals. But you don't have to, I already have the job.
Right.
I'll just go do it. It'll be experience. And so I worked like 7 days for, a year, like doing these events. But it was such an awesome opportunity. I met all these people. It gave me experience speaking on behalf of a brand and, sharing it with people around the country. It was just an awesome experience that, my motto became, if I can do it, I will do it. And if I can't, then I can't.
Right.
But so that became this interesting balance of my life where I'd get, our band would be like, hey, we got a week in LA. Can I take a week off? Yeah, go ahead, take a week off. Great. Let's go. Let's go perform in LA for a week. Killer. Then I'd come back and go do a cigar tasting in fucking Kentucky or something, But that kind of just believing that there is a reason why all of this is in my life and trusting that there is a plan beyond what I can understand. But if the opportunities are presenting themselves and I can do it, why would I say no to something that's so obviously possible? And so that was it, man. It was a series of saying yes to as much as I possibly could. And then in the moment, try and see why I'm there. What can I get out of it? And even if it wasn't clear in the moment, even now, 26 years later, there are really meaningful relationships that have had, pivotal moments in my career or personal life that all came, from one of these little trips or one of these tours or one of these things. It just happens.
Right. So at what point do you meet your wife?
I met her. So I was working for Davidoff Madison Avenue, and they bought a store on the west side, and it was a franchise, and Davidoff bought it from the franchisee, and they moved me there as GM. So I was just sales associate, and they're like, you're the guy. So they moved me there as a general manager, and I was doing a lot of teaching for the American Sommelier Association, which is wine education. And so when I moved to the west side, I took that with me, and I started doing the events there. And my wife's old roommate was the admin for this association. And my wife's office was across the street from the mall where that shop was in. So the next class, this girl calls Tiffany and says, hey, my friend Michael's doing this event. We're going to smoke cigars and drink wine. My wife said, that sounds terrible. And then she talked to her mom that night, and her mom was like, oh, slap on some lipstick and go. You never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
And she came in, and it was like all these wine dorks and all these people. And then, like, in walks this elegant woman, and I'm like,
yeah.
Where she was working for, you remember Zagat, the restaurant guys? Yeah. So she worked for Zagat. So I'm like, dude, I just got here. Like, where do you eat around here? Like, I've been eating in this Whole Foods downstairs. I want to die. She was like, I just get a salad and sit at my desk. I'm like, well, that sounds terrible too. Like, do you want to go to lunch tomorrow? She was like, yeah, I'll go to lunch tomorrow. I'm like, all right, let's go to lunch. That was it. That was 2006, fall of 2006, I think.
Nice.
Then we started dating 07, and then rock and roll.
And marriage.
And then marriage, and then kids, and then suburbs.
So you have two daughters,
yeah,
right? 10 and 8, I think.
11 and 9.
11 and 9. Okay.
So close.
I was close. I had 11 and 9 originally.
You had old information.
But you said on one of the other podcasts, I was just trying to put it all together as far as the dates were concerned. So you travel so much last year and the year before, especially, right? You're constantly going around. How do you find the time? First of all, are you still traveling at the same pace? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I always say I'm not gonna, and it's no different than what I just told you. If I can, I do.
Right.
You try and set a more reasonable schedule, try and carve out more time, put as many of my family things in as I can so I don't miss stuff. But then, if I'm out last week and I'm out next week and I'm home this week, and then someone says, hey, do you think you can do an event on Thursday in Detroit? can.
Right.
And I'm trying to build a business, so fuck yeah, I'll go to Detroit.
Right.
And then it's like, well, as long as I'm going to Detroit, I could come in Wednesday, and then we can do 2 things in Detroit. And then before you know it, I'm gone for another week. And,
Right.
you know.
I mean, that's the forever challenge, right? And your kids are right at the age, 11 and 9, where I don't know if they're into sports or I think they're one's into gymnastics.
Yeah, gymnastics and soccer and all of it.
Right. And you don't really want to miss any of that stuff either,
It's really hard, and I do my best to make as much as I can.
Right.
But, I think they understand what we're doing. I mean, they remember when, Daddy worked for another company, and I was traveling a lot then, and then COVID was great because everyone was together,
Right.
But then once we started getting back with Ferio, I remember explaining to them, I'm going to have to start traveling again, but it's different because before I would travel because I had to keep my job and I had to prove, that I'm doing a good job and that way I get paid. And I said, now it's different. Now this is Ferio Tego and this is for us. We're not doing this for anyone else. This is our family. This is Brendan's family. And I'm doing this for you. This is a different kind of move. And I remember it was like after after the first 6 months or something, I was traveling all over and I had just gotten home. And I was like, look, let's have a great weekend because I have to leave on Monday again. And they're just like, see you at Christmas, Dad. And just like that. I was like, yeah, but I have to do it. And she was so little at the time. She's like, I know, Dad. It's for Ferio Tego, right? I'm like, yeah, exactly. She's like, all right, you have to go do it.
I feel like daughters are more blunt than sons.
Could be. I don't have one.
Yeah, I know that you only have 2 girls, but I could tell you that, man, when my daughter speaks, it's like daggers. It's just cutthroat, right to the point, extremely distinct, and you're like, okay, got it. Whereas my boys are a little more, they can be emotional, but they're not as direct.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right, so I want to touch briefly on Brendan because you mentioned him in a few of the other podcasts, but it's very, very brief. So, for one, who is he? I know he's obviously...
No idea.
Yeah,
no.
So he's obviously a business partner of yours with Ferio Tego. Where did you meet him, and how did that relationship kind of build?
So before Ferio Tego, I worked at a company called Nat Sherman.
I've heard about them.
I like how he just says it like nobody knows who that is.
Well, some don't. I mean, let's face it. We really only built the cigar business starting in 2011. So even though people that were from the Northeast or maybe even Florida because of the connection to New York had a lot of relationship with it, but otherwise, if you go to Chicago, no one ever heard of Nat Sherman really.
Right.
So I don't want to assume people know it. Plus, it's been gone for 5 years. So people who just started enjoying the hobby in the last 5 years,
no idea
wouldn't know about it either.
Right.
So anyway, I worked for Nat Sherman. I got hired in 2011 from Davidoff, and Brendan was the CFO of Nat Sherman. He started a couple years before I did, 2009. And so he was actually really instrumental in either advocating if the family wanted to keep the retail business and keep the cigar business, that they really had to go all in, take it seriously, fix some of the problems, and make it a real business. And Brendan tells a story really funny, but that the Shermans, they were dealing with this recruiter who was like, we have to get somebody like this guy, Michael Herklots at Davidoff. And they kept bringing in these candidates, and the family would be like, well, you got to find someone more like Michael. And then the recruiter came in one day and was like, how about we just go get Michael? And Brendan was like, finally, that sounds like a great idea. And then they reached out to me and we had some meetings. And then, it was like right as we were doing the deal, Brendan tells me the story. It was so cool. I'm like, all right, well, let's, if we're going to do it, let's do it. So then we really got to work building the business, and trying to grow it and being thoughtful. And, I really appreciated his support, but also his discipline. I mean, he's a CFO.
Right.
So, like we were talking about this in the store earlier, you have one person who thinks very reasonably, very responsibly, disciplined.
Logistics.
This is numbers, this is revenue, this could be investment, but let's just look at this pragmatically with zero passion. I wish I could do that.
Right.
Because I look at things exactly the opposite way and forget that things have costs and, you need to get more than you're putting out and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what we did all through our time together at Nat Sherman was work together to grow the business, balancing my impatience and aggressive forward movement with reasonable thought and test and measure and repeat, and so we worked great together, not without conflict, but it was great conflict because we had the same goal in mind, and so it was terrific. And then when Nat Sherman sold, then we worked together on that acquisition and transition into Altria, which was a pretty substantial body of work. And then we grew the business together with Altria for whatever it was, 3 years. And then COVID hit, and then we had to work together to try and sell the business in 2019, which we tried to do first. Then when COVID hit, it killed the ability to sell it. And then we had to work together to close the business. And so when it was all done, you know, I mean, we were much closer than we had been ever, you know. And so then we were talking about who was doing what, and I was going to do this Ferio Tego idea and just start something small and new. He was going to take time off through the holidays and then look for something later. But then the opportunity came where we might be able to acquire the old brands. And I had engaged with Altria and said, look, if you're willing to sell the brands, we're going to buy the brands. And so they were like, look, you got to put an offer in because other people are bidding. And if you want it, you know, get serious. I'm like, I'm fucking dead serious. So I called Brendan. I'm like, they're going to sell the brands. And he's like, well, you know, I figured that was going to happen. I was like, well, I told him we were going to buy the brands. And he goes, who the fuck is we? I'm like, all right, listen to the idea here. Ferio Tego, we use that as the flagship. That becomes the halo. That becomes the brand. And we just put Timeless and Metropolitan under it. Let it exist exactly as it did before. Go back to the factories. They're already said that they'll support me in my endeavor. They'll definitely support us if we're bringing back the volume of the old stuff. And he was like, okay, let's do it. And we got to work.
And you had the relationships.
And we had the relationships.
Right. So,
but we also trusted each other. And that was
huge.
Like, if you think about that moment in time, especially in the Northeast, I mean, it was absolute chaos. Mm-hmm. You know, the pressure of COVID, the working from home, the literal deaths and health issues that were affecting so many people up there. I mean, it was such a distressing time. And now we're winding down this business, and we were just exhausted, like just beat up and exhausted. And at the same time, we're losing our jobs, and we have to come up with whatever this new plan is going to be. And how do you even think about it when you've been stuck at home for 9 months and just everything has gone wrong?
Right.
And so, you know, our business plan was like an afternoon of just brainstorming, like, how might this work and what could go wrong? And, you know, where are we exposed? And do we really think this is going to work? Yes, it's going to work. Like, it has to work. And then I remember we just looked at each other. He's like, look, I trust you implicitly. Can you make your side work? I'm like, 100%. Can you handle all this, all the finance and all the back end and putting together the corporate structure? He's like, 100%. I'm like, then, dude, we've already done this before. Like, let's just fucking do it. He's like, all right, let's do it. Then we had to tell our wives, which was a whole different, that was a whole different part of the process, but an equally good one. And they said the same thing. Like, you know, Brendan, his wife, like, Brendan, you don't know anything about making cigars. Like, yeah, but he does. He's been doing it. And my wife's like, but you don't know how to, you know, do books and business stuff and whatever. I'm like, of course not. I just know how to do everything up until that point. And he's the CFO.
Right.
He can do it. But together, we've been doing this already. Let's just do it. And they were like, okay. Go for it.
So does he go to PCA too, or no?
Oh, yeah. He travels a lot.
He does?
He does a lot of the industry stuff. He works a lot. We're distributed by Davidoff. So he works very closely with Davidoff and all of our planning and procurement. And then he works a lot with the factories doing that planning and procurement. All of our corporate stuff, all of our trade stuff. And then he would come to every event that I go to. It's just, you know, it's very expensive to pay for 2 flights and 2 hotels and 2...
You can't stay in the same room?
What's that?
One bed?
Excuse me, I have a call. Hello? No. So, you know, we're like local stuff. He does a lot. He's coming to Great Smoke this weekend. So he does a lot of the stuff and is doing more and more. But if we're talking about a week in market with our representation and doing events and it's better that I just do it solo and then he focus on still maintaining all the operations at home.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
All right. So Davidoff handles your distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you had a relationship with Davidoff, right? As Michael Wasp was, high-fiving in the background over here. How did you get that to happen? And like, what did that look like? Was it just a phone call? Was it a whole pitch? Because that's a big deal. Having Davidoff handle your distro, that's up there.
It's about as up there as it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no better endorsement than the global leader of luxury cigars saying, we want you in our book.
For sure.
So I worked for Davidoff for 9 years. Then I left Davidoff to join Nat Sherman. One of the blends that we make, our Metropolitan Host, was made by the Eiroa family in Honduras that Davidoff subsequently bought in 2008, I think. They bought Camacho. So that project stayed in that factory after Davidoff bought it. When I joined Nat Sherman, we were going to get serious about the cigar business. And literally my first call on my first day was to my buddy JT at Davidoff, okay, first day, what are we going to do? Like, we have this project here. We're going to grow this business. Like, we have to really work together. So we immediately started working together again, working on this host project. And then we also had retail. So I brought in some of the Davidoff brands into the Nat Sherman townhouse. And so it was just an uninterrupted relationship from 2002 until 2020. And throughout the process, we were keeping all our factory partners up to date. When we were trying to sell, then when COVID hit, then we couldn't sell. Now we're going to wind down the business. Like, it was constant updates to the factories of, look, this is where we are now. This is where we are now. So the last call we made in November was, hey, don't throw anything out. Don't do anything. We just bought the brands. So after the holidays, when you reopen the factories, let's engage and let's talk about what this is going to mean. And so immediately they were like, great, we'll get to work, but how are you going to sell this? Like, I have no idea, but we'll figure it out by the time these cigars are ready. So can you just start production? Which is, by the way, a whole other piece of this story. By the time we started production, now you're in the height of the COVID boom.
Right.
And every factory was already at max capacity. We went to Quesada, Plasencia, and Camacho that did not need any orders.
Right.
And we said, we just bought the brands. Aren't you happy? And they're like, good for you, but we don't have any room in a factory. And I'm like, well, that's tough because we need product now. And they put us in the front of the line, all three factories, and they started manufacturing based on what we thought we were going to be able to sell with no money because we had just spent all our money. And they said, no problem. All of them. The cigar ring started printing. Everyone started manufacturing, and we didn't have to give a dime. And
that's awesome.
And that's because, my parents and my grandparents, they really believed in, like, you do the right thing, you stay above board, you respect people, you treat people right. And I've always operated that way. And when all of a sudden, this whole culmination of things happened and I needed that little bit of room, every manufacturing partner was like, no problem. So then we continuing dialogue with what's happening with production, what's happening here. These are the options that we're looking at for distribution and fulfillment and storage, whatever. And they said, we should look at this. Like, this is an interesting opportunity. Like, let's look at what we can do. And so we took a very different approach rather than just fulfillment or just representation. It was a much more, it was a very different way of structuring a distribution deal, but ultimately it ended us up in the portfolio sitting next to Avo and Camacho and Zeno and those great brands, let alone Davidoff. And so ultimately that became the plan, and which was awesome. But then the other problem is now we went from Brendan and Michael and a couple of brokers figuring out how to bang on doors and sell cigars, right, to now we were going to restore these brands through Davidoff distribution, which was enterprise level distribution.
Right.
We didn't have enough product on order.
Manufacturing.
So then we had to call the manufacturers again and like, okay, you want to know how we're going to sell? Good news. We're distributed by Davidoff. That's great news. Yes, here's the updated POs. And we need, another 40% of what we said we were going to need on top of what we asked for, and we need it by September. And they were like, what are you doing? Like, we're gonna do this.
Right.
Bro, we had 100% of our orders from all the manufacturers sitting in Pinellas Park, Florida by the third week of September.
No kidding. Wow. All three.
Everything.
That's impressive. I mean, to get one to do that is difficult.
Everything. Dude, Plasencia, Esteli, COVID, boom. 100% delivered and right.
Okay.
No wet cigars, no bullshit, properly aged, like real deal, beautiful work.
Wow, man. All right, so you start to take off here, right? And you kind of like one thing that you like to that you've mentioned in previous podcasts too is the fact that if you were knocking on doors, okay, realistically maybe you get to like 100, 200 accounts, maybe in your first year, but right, you kind of launched into a fact where you had 500 to 1,000 accounts somewhere in that realm, right? In that threshold. So now you have PCA coming up. And you always kind of have these goals, I would assume, as far as where you want to be. What would be a number for you that you'd say, hey, this is a great PCA? How many accounts would you want that were new to open up Ferio Tego this year?
It's not the way I view a show.
I should ask Brendan that question. It's a Brendan question.
Well, you know, like I think every year we probably get 40 or 50 leads. I think that's a really nice number.
That's a realistic number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, we count the leads, we follow up, we share it with the Davidoff crew, they follow up. But more than just the leads, for me, it's the conversations. And sometimes those conversations are with our current supporters. But look, if we have to fly all the way to New Orleans or Las Vegas to write an order, everyone is doing something wrong.
Right.
But if you're together with the majority of the industry, the best in class, are we really going to say 2 boxes of this, 3 boxes of this, 5 boxes of this? Or are we going to talk about, tell me about your business exactly and how you do business, and then let me share how we do it. And are we really making the most money together that we can, or what are we missing? And so for me, it's the strategic conversations and like the real demonstrative moments of partnership that I leave saying, okay, these are the opportunities for this year. Could be a special project, could be a series of events, it could be just a shared target of how we're going to do incremental increase or add these new blends. Those are how we measure success. The sales are great, the leads are awesome, but leaving with a strategy with, 24 partners, that to me is the measurement of success. And I think Brendan would say the same thing.
Okay. So, yeah, that's kind of incalculable.
Of course it is, which I know is brutal for financial people and people who think, like most smart business people do. But as an artist, you got to think differently than that. You have to think about, who loves the work and who resonates with your story and resonates with the products that they will go out and share it and evangelize it and tell the story over and over and over. That's worth more than, a 5-store order.
Sure. Is there a retailer, let me ask you this, is there a retailer that you've kind of seen maybe as of late in like the past 6 months to a year that you're like, that's somebody I would want to do business with? I like how they do things, whether you see them on social media or wherever.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Who is it?
You.
We already do business.
I know, but that's where it started.
Yeah.
That's
well,
exactly
it did.
where it
Yeah,
started.
of course. It started at PCA.
And there's a handful, but, at this point, we're 3 years in.
Right.
3.5. And though Ferio Tego is in no way a household name, but I think among the best informed, well-educated, savvy members of our industry, I have to believe they've all heard of us and hopefully seen ratings, seen reviews, seen the success of our brand in market since our launch. So if we're still not doing business, then I don't know if year 3 is the year that I should be trying to convince someone.
Yeah, I don't think that's I'm not looking at that aspect. You know what I mean? I just think that
So sure, there's great stores out there that we are not in.
I just think that real recognizes real sometimes. You're like, hey, I like what you're doing. Or you just see them and you can see that they're working hard, whether they're supporting your brand or not.
So I have those conversations, and once in a while they work out great.
Yeah.
As we did.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, "Oh, thanks very much. Congratulations to you too." And
I'll tell you what, man. That was
continue not doing business.
Our conversation was like a breath of fresh air. For me, PCA is so up and down. You know, there are really high highs and there are really low lows, right?
Oh, of course.
So you can be sitting there for an hour or two with nothing going on, and and then a retailer comes along and they just punch you in in the gut. With we hear I don't have the shelf space. I'm not really interested. I just want to really try the cigars, or you could just tell that. They just want some free sticks, and they just want to move on their way, right?
Or they want to get out of the conversation.
Yeah,
which is also fine, bro.
Right. I don't want to sit here and talk to you either. Right. 100%. So I think that on that day when we had kind of reached out, when we had kind of met, I was like, that was fucking awesome. That was definitely.
Weren't you hobbling on one wheel?
I was.
Had your leg all.
I did. I popped my calf. So I'm that retarded dad that will do everything with their kids as far as athletically. So when it comes to playing flag football with them or practicing or anything like that, I'll go full sprint and stuff. And after it snaps, I continue to play with them anyways. And
it may come as no surprise to you, I'm not that dad. And I have never snapped anything, bro.
Oh man, I've popped both calves at this point.
I don't even have calves.
Yeah,
I go from knee to ankle.
That's fantastic.
There's no calf.
How do I get that? I'd like that. Just stop doing stuff?
Like eating.
Yeah, just give up food?
That's it.
I really like food.
I hear you. I do too.
All right, so if you're kind of looking back, like you said, you're still kind of in your infancy, right? It's 3 years running, right? As you look at a child and so
exactly.
Right, yeah. So, but you still have enough time there where you can kind of look and say, hey, could we have done this differently? Would you have done anything differently looking back, saying as far as your approach?
In a perfect world, we would have done things differently.
Okay.
In a COVID world, we just did it the way we did it.
Sure.
So like flow, we launched Ferio. We also shipped Timeless, the first two Timeless at the same time as Ferio. It didn't give we didn't leave a lot of room for brands to be reestablished because we felt that it was so important to get the Timeless and Metropolitan brands back on shelves as quickly as possible to close that gap of absence. And it seemed critical at the time. I don't know if it was critical necessarily.
Right.
But it made the most sense given our manufacturing partners, our distribution partners. It just made the most sense at the time. But, looking back, I don't know if I would have rather let Ferio live for a little while longer and maybe launch Timeless and Metro in the first quarter of 22, let's say. But, time and place, man, it was just such a wild moment, and there were so many things happening, and it was just like, let's just do it. The faster it's done, the better for everyone, because then we can figure out what normal is going to be. Because the other thing is we didn't have a normal launch anyway, because it's not like this is a brand new brand, a brand new company. We're going to start with store one, right? Here's person 0, and then it's 2, and then it's 4, and then it's 8. Because we let it rip through Davidoff's distribution.
Right.
So like day one, when we launched Elegancia and Generoso, we shipped to 400 stores the first day. So we couldn't take that approach anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't look back with regret. I look back with some level of combination of like wonder and PTSD that
right.
we even got through it all.
Well, you kind of always look to get better, and the only way you can get better is if you kind of look at the past, right?
I love reviewing the past. I love learning from the past, but I don't live in the past.
No.
And like to think of how many people during COVID have said, I can't wait to get back to the way things were. It's like, you've never said that in your life.
Right.
Why would you spend the next 15 months trying to reset your life back in 2019?
And things will never be the same.
They will never be the same. And if you take the opposite approach and you learn during this period and you get scrappy and you get agile and you try new shit that you never would be able to do before, you're going to come out the other side way better than you were in 2019.
Right.
And I really think we did. I think we've established a very small business that has a super comprehensive portfolio, and now we have the benefit of a great core portfolio that we don't have to innovate with. We just have to tell each story over and over and over and over again and continue to build the equity in the brands that we already have.
Do you think that, I mean, Timeless and the Metropolitan are two totally different things when it comes to comparing Ferio Tego?
Yeah.
Do you feel like because you released them at the same time, Ferio Tego just didn't get enough spotlight at that point? Because
it did. It got lots of spotlight.
Okay.
Tons of spotlight.
Right.
But again, it was only 2 SKUs.
Right.
Just Elegancia and Generoso. I wanted to do Suma. I wanted to do Core, but I had to get Metropolitan and Timeless back because these were important brands to people who've been selling them upwards of 30 years.
Right.
Like, we got to get those back in market.
Yeah, and it became a point where customers were out seeking them through other retailers. Like, you couldn't get them anywhere else, and once they were gone, they were gone.
Yeah. And then we finally got Suma out a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, okay, boom, now Ferio Tego has presence beyond just 2 boxes now, and that has really lifted everything. So I don't have regrets. I think we did it. I think we did exactly what needed to be done in our circumstance, which is there's no case study for what we did.
No.
You can look at lots of startups, lots of cigar startups, and you can learn which ones did things well and which people didn't. But there's no way. If anyone wants to do it,
right,
we are the first case study. So feel free to
good luck with that.
To beat us up and figure out what we did wrong.
Write that down.
But we're a one story for sure.
So now, so we're going into PCA. You have, more often than not, a lot of brands like to do limiteds, right? Some will do it every month, which you've kind of spoken your opinions on. And then some maybe once or twice. And some will talk about maybe one release every quarter, or maybe just 2 or 3 throughout the year. A lot of consumers, brand owners, manufacturers will actually use that as kind of an incentive to book an appointment at the show so that they can get that traction. You don't have a limited, right? So what is your way of pulling other retailers into your store, or into the booth to really kind of talk about Ferio Tego?
Because as much as memes rule the world,
yes,
core is king.
Okay.
Period.
I agree.
I'll look at any retailer's point of sale system and look at their top 10 selling SKUs, and they're not limited.
Well, just overall volume. I mean, that would make more sense.
So what do you sell when you run out of the Dog Booger 2024?
Well, the Dog Booger, the 2024 year was really good. So I would put that in a sample.
Salty.
I'd put that in a sampler pack with the Dog Booger.
But you know what I mean. Retailers need a sure thing.
Sure.
And eventually retailers want brands that they don't have to evangelize, because they're brands that their customers already know, love, trust, and want to buy. That's our model. And it sounds like a very new way of thinking or prehistoric way of thinking, but it's the way it is. I mean, if you look at the strongest brands in our industry, the most time honored, are often the ones with the least amount of innovation, because they're just doing it over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not critical. It's not meant to sound like criticism at all.
That's praise.
Frankly, it's admirable.
Right.
Because that's real brand equity.
I think that's true. But now if I look back at the end of 2024, and especially Q3 to Q4 of that year, you started to see a dip, right? You started to see consumers smoking less, and a lot of those brands, what they did was they started pushing out a lot of different limiteds.
Yep.
To boost their sales.
Yep.
To further that number so that they could finish off positive for the year, right? So, I don't have the answers.
Me neither.
You know what I mean? And I love your view on things. I love your perspective on things. I believe on the whole core is king thing. I also believe in bringing attention back to the brand when it comes to one-offs or different things.
I do too, and we did a limited edition timeless
right
in 2022. We're going to do a limited edition this year on another project. So to me, as long as they're thoughtful, like you can see the difference when you look. I'm a Davidoff fan forever, and now more so because they do our distribution. If you look at what they're doing, they're not just dropping flavor of the months every 3.
No,
they're meaningful releases, commemorative releases. They have a real thought and structure. They can answer the reason why they exist.
Right.
And it's not to close the gap on a tight year.
Right.
It's because they're bringing something memorable and different to either celebrate a moment or offer an experience that can't be offered in mass. And I take that approach. Maybe it's because I learned under that discipline for so long. So if we have something to celebrate, yeah, absolutely we're going to celebrate with something special and limited. But it also depends on where you are in your journey as a brand.
Yeah.
So if you're an established brand, time-honored brand, then sometimes you need the headline and excitement of something new to keep your time-honored brand feeling relevant in a time when all these new things are happening. But we are this kind of hybrid of legacy and new, and being a 3-year-old company with 3 brands, 12 blends, we have something new that you don't sell.
Yeah.
And it's much more thoughtful to, rather than bringing something brand new that no one's ever heard of, that everyone has to tell a new story of. Well, if you don't have Ferio Tego Timeless Sterling yet, make that your new. Let's grow the business with something that already has fans, so you can see a faster return, so that you can help build the equity and continue to make these brands and blends the ones that people go to after the shiny limited meme cigar is sold out. We have, our portfolio is big enough. There's 14 stories. It's a lot of stories to tell.
For sure.
And you add one more, that's one less that they're going to tell from the 14 we have.
Yeah, I totally. And there's definitely some self-cannibalism or whatever, where, your consumer is no longer smoking the one, they move to the next one, or so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, I can see all of those things. I can also see the fact that a lot of retailers aren't really good at their jobs. Well, that's always the downfall in this industry. And sometimes, like, to bait the hook, to keep them interested, sometimes companies will make a new cigar every month or something like that. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't think I disagree with it either,
But the cycle has shifted. When I started, company, brand creates cigars. Retailer discovers brand. Retailer and brand form a relationship that then the retailer evangelizes to their consumer. They share the excitement and the moment of discovery to the consumer. The consumer appreciates retailer and then discovers brand.
Which is how it should be.
And then goes back to retailer. Retailer goes back to brand.
Right.
Now, brand,
the phone,
makes product.
Right.
Then brand has to make customer fall in love with it.
Right.
Customer has to ask retailer enough times for it that then the retailer will order it.
Right.
And then when it gets to the store, brand has to tell customer to buy it.
Right.
And then they have to go back and find it and then come back again.
Which is crazy.
But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's not frustrating when it's just the norm. It's not just our industry.
Right.
It's beer, it's sneakers, it's, the whole relationship of brand and consumer and retail has just shifted because it's become easier for consumers to have relationships with brands.
Right.
And so if that's what it is, no problem. Then it's our job to make the retailer's job easier.
For sure.
It's just the way it is, and if you fight it, then you get frustrated, but you also don't win.
No.
So you have to just look at it. If this is the language we're talking now, then let's go. You know,
Right.
no problem. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do more events. I'm going to get out on the road. I'm going to help make the relationship stronger with our retailers, but I'm also going to spend most of my time with your consumers, and your consumers are going to come because I'm the one that put it out on our social brand, our brand's social media to connect that circle again.
Right.
But that's what it is.
Right. All right. I got two more questions. A little bit further down the road here. Okay. So speaking of that structure, I had a customer of Postania reach out to me today. They emailed me and they said, hey, I bought some cigars from a retail store and I've just received the product and it was all extremely dry. Now, I know this account. I haven't done business with this account for years just because I didn't like what they were doing with the product. And I'm not the person to have that argument. I'd just rather say, we're done here. Customer asked me if there's anything I could do for having those bad cigars.
Yep.
So what do you do in that situation?
Well, first of all, I always respond.
Me too.
Right? Because lots of brands just ignore it.
You can't dead air it.
So you have to respond. My rule is always, look, as much as I'm grateful for our relationship consumer, we live and die with our relationships with our business partners. And so you're not a customer of ours, you're a customer of theirs.
Right.
And so the first thing is you have to reach out to your retailer because that's who you did the transaction with. And I can reach out to the retailer, but you did the deal, so you should really work out with your retailer how to make that whole. But keep me in the loop.
Right.
Because if that retailer says, hey, pound sand, well, obviously they're not looking to keep you as a customer.
Right.
Ever. And so then if I know that it's in our best interest to keep that customer as a customer, then you find a way to help them out.
Right.
And, I don't think it has to be 100% restitution. I think people are really just looking to, it's almost just a pulse check on, how serious are you? What are you going to do? I had a guy actually reach out the other day who said he bought, he was saying that when he takes the footband off his Elegancia, it pulls a little piece of the wrapper leaf off.
Oh, God.
And it's happened, 4 times. And he sent me a picture of the foot. And I said, look, first of all, thank you for sending this directly to me. And, I'm sorry to hear it. And footbands are tricky. And, you have to take a little care. The good news is the cigar didn't unravel. It didn't fall apart. And as soon as you light it, that part's gone anyway.
Right.
But obviously that's not a fault of your manufacturer. That's just one of the realities of this. It's not a systemic problem, certainly, or I would know it.
Right.
But if you'd like, when I get back to town, if you want to give me an address, I'd be happy to send you a couple Elegancias, and I'll take the footbands off myself, and that way, they'll be all right. And he wrote me back. He's like, all good, man. No sweat. I just wanted to let you know, and next time you're in town, maybe we can have a cigar together.
That's cool.
Perfect. But if you said, hey, that'd be great, here's my address, all right. I can't send you a whole humidor full of cigars, but
right.
I'll send you a couple cigars. What the hell?
For sure. Okay. That's a good way to handle it.
But on larger issues, I bought 2 boxes and they're dry. Well, they weren't dry when we delivered them.
Right.
And so you really have to have this conversation with your retailer.
Right.
And then, of course, you have to evaluate your relationship with that retailer, too, because if yours are dry, they're all dry. And if they're all dry, that's the end of that.
Right. All right, one last quick topic. So I don't know if you've seen this circulating, but Aficionado is allegedly there's a lawsuit pending with them as far as selling data.
Really?
Yeah. You haven't heard that at all?
No.
So, yeah.
He doesn't subscribe, so he's like.
So you're not a subscriber. So so here's what's kind of remarkable to me is it's kind of all over social media. It's like it's in my feed,
Really?
Yeah.
Like recently?
Yeah.
I've been on the road. I haven't looked at my feed.
So, I get hit up with this, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. How do you know that this fits for my profile, right? Like, how did Instagram give that away to the lawsuit people about Aficionado? You know what I'm saying?
I don't even understand what it is.
So there's supposedly aficionado had sold the data of their consumers without the consent of the consumers knowing.
Name, address, phone number, that type of stuff.
Yeah. And now there's this lawsuit that's pending on aficionado. So you haven't heard that yet.
From who's suing them?
It's a class action suit some lawyer's trying to get together.
Yeah, you know what, man? Everyone has my name, address, telephone number. I mean, honest to God, what's it worth anymore? Could you imagine trying to, hey, listen, I have this really valuable database of name, address, and phone number of men between the ages of 35 and 60,
right?
30% who have died already, and I don't know.
I thought that was kind of crazy too, right? Because our phone's listening to us 24/7. If I say electric scooters, all of a sudden they're going to be on my feed, and that's perfectly fine. But meanwhile,
it doesn't feel like a class action lawsuit that's going anywhere, and I have to believe that my data has been sold so many times,
right?
Significantly greater volume, greater price, and to higher targets than whoever would want to buy Cigar Aficionado's list.
Right.
So I won't lose sleep over that one tonight.
I just thought it was crazy, man.
That is crazy.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much where we're going to wrap things up, man.
This was great, bro.
Thank you so much for coming out and doing this podcast and doing the cut and light upstairs.
I appreciate the opportunity to share the story because as many times as you share it, there's still infinite number of people who haven't heard it.
Sure.
And, I told you last year, I think what you guys are doing with this show and with all your content and all your work, even the shop, if you guys haven't been to this store, it's so well appointed. It's so well lit. You know who works there. You know who doesn't. I was saying to one of the guys, like, I've probably been in 600 stores in the last 3 years, 2.5 years. And you just know when a shop has it right. And immediately you're in the 1% of the 1%.
Thanks, man.
Which seems so crazy, but when so many stores are doing things so poorly, not because it's bad, but just because they're not thinking differently or trying harder, when you walk into a business that is clearly focused on the business and the customer experience and caring about your vendors and making sure that it looks good and it's well lit, man, it's just such a relief. Because you know that the scenario that you just described with the gentleman with dry cigars from a bad retailer would never happen here.
Correct.
And that, we were talking in the car. And you asked the question too, are there retailers that you want to be in? Sure. I want to be in every retailer. And there's legacy retailers that have been in business forever. It would be an honor to have a place in their humidor. But I'm also really proud to be in the new stores and the smaller stores and the single owner operated stores. When you walk in and you see how serious they take it, it's just like, this is where we want to be. This is where we're going to grow, because this is where our story is going to be shared and told and loved and revered. So I'm from this to the show to the store. It's just, man, you guys do it. You do it right. I'm super pumped for the rest of the night.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, dude. And then you're going to be at the Great Smoke.
And then the Great Smoke, man, Saturday.
You're going to be there this Saturday.
It's going to be awesome. And it always is.
Yeah, it is. It's a great experience, for sure.
I'm hosting the virtual side again, so I got a full day on camera. And I don't know when this is going to air, but
I'm probably going to release it tomorrow.
Oh, cool. So then if you're watching this on Friday, then make sure you can tune in Saturday on YouTube and Facebook and watch the Great Smoke, too.
Full dose of Michael Herklots throughout the weekend.
Brutal. Do it in small doses. Break it up a little bit.
Well, thanks again, bro. I appreciate you coming out, man.
Thank you.
So, all right, guys, thanks.